So, hi all. Thanks again for being here. I am super excited about today's webinar all about LGBTQIA plus resources. I'll introduce myself and then pass it along to my co-presenter to do the same. My name is Dean Strauss. My pronouns are he, him, and I am the communications manager at ASAN. I am a white person with curly brown hair and yellow glasses. I'm super excited for today's conversation, but I will let my co-presenter introduce himself first.
Hi, everyone. My name is Jules Good. I use they, them pronouns, and I am the state advocacy manager at ASAN. I am a white person with short, dirty blonde hair and kind of a mullet-like situation. And I'm wearing glasses with big purple rims, and I'm here in my home office. Super glad to be with you today.
Awesome. Thanks, Jules. So I'll get us started by talking about some resources ASAN worked on, and then Jules will share some resources from other orgs. So welcome and thanks again for being here. If we can go to the next slide. Awesome. So, like I said, we're going to talk about a few different resources today. I will be going over the proud and supported resources that ASAN worked on, along with the Burton Blatt Institute and the National Alliance for Direct Support Professionals. Um, You can find all of those on ASAN's website, as well as the shared website for all the Proud and Supported resources. We will share all those links later on. And then Jules will be talking about Before You Go, Know Your Rights and What to Expect at the Doctor and in the Hospital, which is a resource from the Autistic Women and Non-Binary Network and the National LGBTQ Task Force, and also some additional resources from the U.S. Gender and Disability Justice Alliance and some others we recommend. Next slide, please. Awesome. So we're going to get started with Proud and Supported. So, what is Proud and Supported? This is a resource series that ASN worked on. It includes 6 different resources: definitions of beyond, rights and respect, a self advocate's guide to safer sex, what do I need to know about sexual assault, a self advocate's guide to gender affirming healthcare, and barriers to gender affirming healthcare. So, we're going to talk more about all of these in detail, but this is just an overview of the resources that are included in this series. Next slide, please. Definitions and Beyond is the first resource in the Proud and Supported series. So that covers things like what being LGBTQ plus is, the different ways that people can identify or present themselves, and how those two things are different, the differences or the different kinds of discrimination that LGBTQ plus folks experience, what stereotypes are, why those are bad, and how to find community and support if you are feeling bad about being different, or just looking for a sense of community for people who can relate to your experiences. Next slide, please. And again, if you have any questions about these resources that we go over, or other resources that you're looking for, please feel free to use the Q&A, and we will go over any questions folks have afterwards. Rights and Respect is another resource in the Proud and Supported series that helps LGBTQ plus autistic folks understand what our legal rights are, why fighting for our rights is important, what it looks like when a support worker respects us or not, and what options we have if support workers do not respect us, and goes more into depth about the expectations, things you can do if your rights are not being respected, or how to uh, stand up for those rights from the very beginning, because those things can be hard to navigate. Next slide, please. A self advocate's guide to safer sex is another one in the Proud and Supported series. So this goes over more broadly why people have sex, how to have safer sex, and goes into some detail about like what pregnancy is, how to prevent it if that's what you want to do, what STIs are, including HIV, how to prevent them, and some resources that exist in relation to all of these things, and what sexual and reproductive health care is, how you can get that, how that ties into other kinds of healthcare, and how it ties into some kinds of insurance or different ways that you might access healthcare. Next slide, please. And all of these resources go way more in depth and in detail than I am here. So I recommend checking them out if any of these are interesting to you. Um, Self Advocate's Guide to Gender Affirming Healthcare, because it goes over what gender affirming healthcare is, but also going to break down what the words transgender, non binary, and intersex mean and how they relate to this conversation, to give you kind of the stepping stones to get into gender affirming healthcare, what that looks like for different people, how you can actually access that, the steps to getting gender affirming healthcare, especially as it relates to, again, other kinds of healthcare you might get, types of insurance that you have, or the different ways that you access healthcare. It also touches on how you can be an ally and a friend to transgender and non binary people, um, and support some of the conversations around gender affirming healthcare. Next slide. Barriers to gender affirming healthcare is going to touch more on, the limits or, attacks against gender affirming healthcare, whereas the first resource is how you can get and support gender affirming healthcare. This is about some of the things that limit folks from getting gender affirming healthcare. So, um, what people need to do, to get gender affirming healthcare and deal with some of the barriers that exist, what rules there are around gender affirming healthcare, so the things that might limit people, or just again the obstacles people have to get past in order to get gender affirming healthcare, and how these rules hurt transgender and non-binary people who are trying to access this kind of care. Um, what kind of things might stop people from being able to get gender affirming, healthcare? So these barriers that exist, but also, attacks against gender affirming healthcare, access to care, access to transportation, health insurance, the paperwork trap, all of the things that limit, gender affirming healthcare. Often the same things that limit all different kinds of healthcare, because these issues are all, one, really, and how some people are trying to stop others from getting, gender affirming healthcare. So, getting into some of those attacks against gender affirming care, and trans and non binary communities in general. Next slide, please. So, all of these resources, this was just a very quick overview of the things in the Proud and Supported, series. So, we're going to take a field trip over to the website so that you can find these resources. Um, all of these are going to be, together. Um, Amazing. So, if you go to our resources page and you scroll down, you should be able to find them under toolkits. And then scrolling down right to Proud and Supported up top.
Wait, sorry, Dean, do you see it?
Yes, right under Our Bodies, Our Rights. Oop, to your left and then down 3 or 4.
What am I? Oh my gosh. Sorry.
That's right. We can share the link with folks and you can, find that.
Yeah, you can also use the search bar and type in Proud and Supported, and then you'll see Proud and Supported series. And then it will give you links to each of the sections that Dean just talked about, um, so that you can click on the ones that are most relevant to you.
Perfect. Thanks, Jules. And I've also shared that in the chat. If folks want to check out those resources, highly recommend it. And there are some other resources that we didn't go over, that are super helpful for folks.
Okay. Um, so another resource that we wanted to share with y'all today is one that was created by the Autistic Women and Non-Binary Network and the National LGBTQ plus Task Force. It's called Before You Go, Know Your Rights and What to Expect at the Doctor and in the Hospital. So it's a great resource that goes over what you can expect when you're going to the doctor or to the hospital as a trans autistic person. It helps you understand what your rights are in those situations. It explains what doctors' responsibilities are to patients, so you know what your doctor should and should not be doing and how they treat you. And it also helps you make safety plans for going to the doctor. A lot of trans and autistic people, understandably, might get nervous about going to the doctor, or have, access needs that they need met in order to have a good experience at the doctor. And so there's some guidance in here about making those safety plans, so that you can kind of plan ahead for those needs. So where can we find this resource? We're going to go to AWN's website, Autistic Women of Non-Binary Network, which is awnetwork.org. And the link here pulls up the webinar about this resource. But if you are just on AWN's homepage, and you go to resources, if you scroll down, you'll see before you go, Trans Autistic Healthcare Guide. You can click on it and then it will pop up in another tab, and you can see the full resource here. Um, There are also some resources from the U.S. Gender and Disability Justice Alliance, which is a kind of like a group of organizations and advocates that ASAN is a part of. Our colleague Nina attends those meetings, and they shared some resources from that alliance for us to share with you. So like I said, it's a group of self-advocates and some organizations that work to teach policymakers, and other human rights organizations about issues that affect both women and gender diverse people, and people with disabilities and people at the intersection of those identities. Um, and their work focuses on the ways that other kinds of discrimination, like racism and queerphobia, combine with ableism to hurt disabled people of color, disabled women, and disabled LGBTQ plus people. So it's a very intersectional approach, and they do a lot of great work. So two kind of things to highlight. You can check out their website, and they have all kinds of information about what they've been up to, the different like reports that they've written, and the advocacy work that they've done. Um, and they also have a project that is a collection of stories from self-advocates about their experiences getting gender affirming care. Um, and also in getting sexual and reproductive health care. So there's a lot of great stories there, where you can hear from other queer and trans autistic people and people with other disabilities, about their experiences getting care. And then lastly, a few other resources to plug. Um, this is a great resource from an org called A Better Balance, and the Transgender Law Center. They work together on this resource. And it's basically information about what your rights are as a worker if you're trans or non-binary. So you know, your right to be safe from discrimination and things like that in the workplace. Um, they talk about the rights of pregnant people at work. They talk about the Federal Family and Medical Leave Act. And they also talk about statewide paid leave protections for LGBTQ plus people. Um, the resources that we've shared up until now, so the Proud and Supported resource and AWN's Before You Go resource, those are both in plain language. This resource is not in plain language. but it has a lot of good information if you are able to access it. So that is all of the info and resources that we've got for you today. And now we will open it up for any questions that folks have. And you can see in the chat, Dean shared a whole bunch of links to all the resources that we discussed today. So feel free to save those links and come back to them whenever you need them or want to look at them.
Yeah, while we wait for folks to share any questions that you have about either the resources we talked about or similar resources that you're looking for, um, I highly recommend if these are resources that are helpful or if these are like topics that are interesting to you that you want to learn more about. Of course, I recommend checking out the resources that we've recommended, but also look into the organizations who are doing the work on these. So, the Autistic Women and Non-Binary Network, the National LGBTQ Task Force, the US Gender and Disability Alliance. Um, all of these resources are super great. And all of these organizations have a ton of other great resources that are related to these topics that might be really helpful or might help you find additional resources. I always recommend looking into the folks both that worked on it and anyone who collaborated on these. It's a great way to find additional resources, especially if there's like specialized or local care that you're looking for. A lot of the times, that's what you'll find the groups who are working on like a more local level that can help you in your city or your state, or might be familiar with the people who are doing that kind of work locally. Oliver has asked any suggestions for social or peer support resources. So, Jules, if you have any thoughts, go ahead.
Let me grab a few links right now. There are two or three groups that are really great. Who did I send an email about this to? I will find it. Um,
But in the meantime, I will say first, if you are lucky enough to have a local LGBTQ community center or anything similar, I know not every city necessarily is. For myself in Chicago, Center on Halsted, for example, is our local LGBTQ community center, and Center on Addison for LGBTQ seniors. I always recommend looking into one if they already have existing peer support groups. And also seeing if you can start your own if that's something that like, you feel up to. I find it's a great way to find other folks, and if you're even able to be the one to start that, there's often other folks who are happy to like support it, who maybe just didn't think about or weren't sure how to get it started. And in the inverse, I have found that a lot of centers for independent living have really great peer support groups. And are often open and excited if there are folks who want to start additional ones for like different groups. So, if you wanted to start one for autistic LGBTQ folks, a lot of centers for independent living are usually super open to that. They're always excited for people to, one, remember they exist and know about the resources they do, and also like try to build the community in the way that they are trying to build it. And Jules, if you have suggestions, I will pause.
I'm looking. Uh, I'm trying to find these links. It might take me a second, but I know I have them.
No worries. Take your time. Um, as for like other social groups, I always recommend looking into if there are groups in your area doing pride events, whether that is like LGBTQ orgs doing pride events in June, or disability groups doing Pride events in July for Disability Pride Month, or June for Autistic Pride Day. Meeting with those groups, again, that's usually where you'll find like the organizations, or the individuals most of the time who are like doing the work in your community. And I find most of the time people are really excited if there are people who want to get involved, start something new. So if you want to start an affinity group for disabled LGBTQ folks, reaching out to groups who are doing work in one or both of those areas is a good way to do it. They may also know about existing groups. You may not necessarily have to start your own, but I think it's always good to be prepared. And finding the folks who are doing that work is a good way to do it without having to do as much heavy lifting as starting from the scratch. And then someone asked or said, I apologize that I'm late. Will this be recorded and shared after? And will you send us the resources you put in the chat, etc.? Yes, absolutely. This will be recorded and shared to our YouTube channel, hopefully this week. And we will share all of the resources here, and hopefully the slides with folks registered on Zoom. So that should be within this week as well.
I found it. I'm gonna put it in the chat. There is a virtual resource called the Loft Center, that does virtual peer support meetings for LGBTQ plus adults with disabilities twice a month. And you can go on their website, and you can click on any of the dates that you want to attend and register. Then you'll get the information about how to join. That one I think is available to like anybody anywhere. There are also some location specific ones. There's one in the Bay Area of California, so like the kind of San Francisco area. That is that does a lot of awesome like peer support work. And they have one that's specifically for trans autistic people. And then they have a few other groups. We have worked with the oh, sorry, let me actually send this to everybody. Um, we have worked with their founders before. And I think Bird Seligren is a ACI alum, right? They've been involved in some of our programs. Um, and they're all super duper queer friendly. So like even if they're even if you're trying to join a group that's not LGBTQ specific, they are very like open and affirming uh in general. Let me go back and get that other link. Yeah, so those are two. There's also one in Massachusetts that I am struggling to remember the name of. Is it Rainbow Connection? No. If I can remember it, we'll put it in a follow-up email or add it to the description of the recording on YouTube. Um, but yeah, like Dean said, there are, I think, a lot of opportunities to get involved in advocacy in this way. I think a lot of times we think of advocacy as like, marching to the state house and talking to legislators, and that's definitely a kind of advocacy, but also, supporting and being supported by people in your community, whether that's like a place-based community or an online community, is also really important because yes, Rainbow Group Mass. Thank you, Dean. You found it. Um, uh, is really important for, sustaining the work that we do and also making connections that allow us to do other kinds of advocacy. So, if you want any help, um, in kind of like brainstorming how to start a group, if you can't find one to join, feel free to reach out to us, and we're always happy to share resources about how to do that type of thing.
Yes, absolutely. You're always welcome to email our info at, which is just our general contact email, and a good way to get a hold of specific staff members if you don't know who or you don't have their contact information. But if there's a specific project that you're really excited about, we're always happy to work with you on it if we're able to, or help you find other folks who are doing similar work or might want to. There are so many. Really cool folks around the country and around the world doing great work in a lot of these arenas. So we're always really excited to connect folks. And a lot of the times, if you are excited about starting something new, there's probably someone who is just as excited, but maybe did not know how to get the ball rolling. But we'll be happy to like offer support and expertise, and if nothing else, the excitement for your project, which is worth a lot when you're getting started on something new. And if there are like specific resources you're looking for, we're always happy to help folks find those or find organizations who do similar work, even if there's not an existing like toolkit like Proud and Supported necessarily. There's probably an organization doing really cool work that might exist in a video webinar podcast format. And while I give folks a couple more, or a little bit more time to add any questions that you have, again, either about the resources we talked about, resources you're interested in, or navigating these things generally, since there were a lot of broad topics, um, I will share again. If you are interested in the things we talked about with the Proud and Supported series, I recommend checking out the series page. There are other resources that we didn't talk about that are still super important and I think useful information, of course. But also, ASAN has done some other cool work, either for LGBTQ plus Pride Month throughout the years, or just generally because this is part of the work we do. So, always recommend looking into that if there is resources you're looking for, work that you are hoping to be inspired by. Please do make more cool resources about this. Highly recommend looking into those and the folks who worked on these different resources. Hmm. What is your favorite of these resources? The resources you shared. Sorry. Um, I mean, I'm a big fan of the Proud and Supported series, I will say, because I think they're all super cool resources that we've released. Um, but I think out of all of them, I think the Rights and Respect is my favorite, if only because I think it's super rare to see a resource that is about like LGBTQ plus identities, specifically of folks who have direct support, like use direct support providers. We usually talk about those as like two very distinct groups of people. So I think it's really cool to have a resource that not only acknowledges that there are disabled LGBTQ folks who are supported by direct support providers, but also that like talks about how to get your rights respected, and the fact that you do have rights that deserve to be met. So I really enjoy that resource, but I'm a big fan of all of these. Jules, do you have a favorite, whether it's on this list or not?
Oh, that's a good question. Obviously, I love Proud and Supported. So many of our colleagues did great work on it. I do really love AWN's resource, the about what to expect when you go to the doctor or the hospital, because I think a lot of people don't realize how like uniquely distressing it can be to get medical care as both an autistic person and a trans person. And so I think it's a really beautifully done resource that was like created by people who hold those identities. And it's just, it's really cool, and I am grateful that it exists.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Not seeing additional questions, I'm happy to call it here, give folks time back. Thank you so much for being here, though. As I said, this will be shared on our YouTube channel, hopefully within this week, and we will share all of the resources we shared and any others that might pop up and be relevant to folks in an email as soon as possible. So, thank you again, and have a wonderful rest of your day and a wonderful rest of Pride Month. Bye, y'all.
Yay! Happy Pride, everybody. Thank you.